Welcome to Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Freiburg.
Great to be here.
And just a quick note for you listening, this content is AI generated, but it's all fully verified by Bastian Freiburg.
That's right.
Today we're diving into, well, the really intricate world of international relations, specifically looking at how it connects with Danish politics.
Yeah, we've got some interesting angles to cover. We're going to unpack some key diplomacy concepts.
Exactly. Things like the role of trust, absolutely fundamental, but also the practical side. International law, diplomatic protocol.
Which sometimes gets overlooked.
It does. And we'll be looking at all this through a Danish lens, which should be interesting for anyone following global affairs and, Denmark's role in it.
Okay, so where should we start? Maybe with the absolute cornerstone, trust.
Yes, trust and relationships. You look at something like the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, the Wiener Convention, and it's clear, building good relationships is the core job.
It really is. And it's funny, isn't it? Because so much focus goes on the visible stuff. Embassies do commercial deals, public events.
Right, the measurable outcomes.
Exactly. But that behind-the-scenes work, that slow burn of building actual mutual trust, it's arguably more critical, though harder to quantify.
And you think about the world we're in now, with so much information, disinformation, false nahater, fake news, propaganda everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Suddenly, having those diplomats on the ground, people you actually trust who understand the nuances, that becomes vital for just basic cross-border understanding.
It cuts through the noise, doesn't it? These relationships, they're not just nice-to-haves, they're the foundation.
The foundation for what?
Well, for successful negotiations, for effective public diplomacy, even for supporting Danish businesses abroad, you need that trust first.
It makes perfect sense. I saw it described somewhere as like police for Denmark.
An insurance policy, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, especially in a crisis. They mentioned the Tenningesagen, the cartoon crisis back in 2005.
The classic example.
That's when you really saw the value or the cost of having or not having those strong pre-existing relationships.
Definitely. And this isn't just about Danish diplomats abroad. Think about foreign diplomats here in Denmark.
Right. They're doing the same thing, trying to build connections.
Exactly. Reaching out across different sectors, business, media, various government departments, not just the foreign ministry.
And that's where it gets interesting, maybe a bit tricky for them here in Denmark.
How so?
Well, understanding the Danish system, it's not always centralized, is it? The foreign ministry has, generalist, maybe resource constraints.
Compared to some countries where the foreign ministry is the undisputed center, yeah.
So if a foreign diplomat needs deep expertise on, say, the Danish labor market, or climate policy, or education.
That knowledge might be sitting in a specialized ministry or even an agency.
Right. And finding the right person, the actual decision maker or expert, can be a challenge for someone from the outside.
That's a structural hurdle, and then there's perhaps a cultural one, too.
Ah, the Danish meeting culture.
Yes. Very efficient, agenda-driven, problem-solving focused, which is great in many ways.
But
it might not always allow for that slower, more relationship-focused interaction that diplomats from other cultures might prioritize initially. Building rapport before tackling the agenda.
That's a really subtle point. We see ourselves as a tillitsbaseret folkfærd, a trust-based nation. But maybe actually building that trust with foreign representatives here takes more conscious effort than we realize. Some diplomats apparently feel their efforts aren't always fully met.
Interesting. So while Denmark's seen as a good, safe posting, getting plugged into the really deep networks, especially within the public administration, might not be automatic.
Yeah, there's that book, Pole Mission in Denmark, which interviewed foreign diplomats about this very thing, Denmark's diplomatic appeal and the practicalities.
Okay, so relationships are key, but sometimes challenging. What about the more formal side? Protocol and etiquette, still relevant.
Absolutely. You might think it's just old-fashioned ceremony, but it's really not.
It's a tool, right? Protocol gives you the universally accepted rules, the norms. Etiquette is more about the culturally specific good behavior.
Exactly. And good protocol provides security, predictability. It ensures everyone's treated equally, which is fundamental in diplomacy. It's even laid out in the Vienna Convention.
It avoids misunderstandings, potentially serious ones. History's shown that, hasn't it? Small protocol mistakes
can have big consequences. Things like the Crimean War, telegram crises, sometimes protocol slip-ups were actually contributing factors.
So it matters, but it's not set in stone, is it? It evolves.
Right. It has roots in, old European aristocratic customs, but it adapts, even when things seem informal today.
there's still an underlying protocol. It helps structure interactions, helps networking happen effectively.
The goal should always be that protocol enables diplomacy, conveying messages, building those relationships, not get in the way.
And again, circling back to crises like the cartoon affair, those personal connections, often built within these formal and informal protocol settings.
Become absolutely vital when things get tough. You need those channels.
Okay, so protocol's still important.
No.
What about technology? Has the digital age changed the game for diplomacy? We're all online now.
That's the big question, isn't it? We have instant communication, video calls.
But does it replace face-to-face for building real trust?
The consensus seems to be no, not really.
Yeah, digital is useful, obviously, but for that deep connection, that nuance.
You still need to be in the room. There's an interesting point about how diplomats use social media, like on X.
What was that?
They tend to project a very harmonious, agreeable image, kind of masking underlying tensions.
So using it more to uphold tradition than to disrupt it? Unlike, say, politicians or celebrities trying to build a personal brand.
Exactly. Diplomats often seem to aim to blend in, reinforce that image of cooperation.
Which suggests that for the real work, information sharing, business deals, crisis management, those personal, direct contacts remain essential. Digital supports, but doesn't replace.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. A really complex area. International criminal law in Denmark. How does that work?
It is complex. A key thing to understand about Denmark is its generally dualistic approach.
Meaning international law isn't automatically Danish law?
Pretty much. It usually needs to be formally implemented through Danish legislation. So a treaty isn't directly enforceable in Danish courts unless there's a Danish law reflecting it.
Okay. So how does Denmark handle major international crimes? Is genocide specifically illegal under Danish law?
Yes, there's a specific law criminalizing genocide, but for others, like crimes against humanity or war crimes,
Yes.
they aren't typically separate named offenses in the main criminal code. They're usually prosecuted under existing Danish laws, the regular criminal code or the military penal code.
So using existing definitions of assault, murder, etc., but applied in the context of, say, war.
Essentially, yes. For instance, the military penal code has a section, Section 36, about war methods that violate international agreements or custom. But crucially, Danish courts can only convict based on Danish criminal law as it exists.
And what about crimes committed outside Denmark? There's this idea of double criminality.
Right. For certain types of jurisdiction, Denmark requires that the act is a crime both where it happened and under Danish law. The penalties don't have to match exactly, but the act itself must be criminal in both places.
So how can Denmark prosecute crimes committed abroad? What gives it jurisdiction?
Several principles apply. Territoriality, obviously crimes on Danish soil or ships.
Right.
Then active personality.
Which it covers.
Danish citizens or residents who commit crimes abroad. Passive personality can apply if the victim is Danish. There's also a protection principle for crimes against Danish state interests.
And universal jurisdiction for the really serious stuff like war crimes.
Denmark has a limited form, mainly for crimes under the Rome Statute, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. But again, prosecution still requires a basis in existing Danish criminal law. And you always have to consider potential immunities under international law.
You mentioned the Rome Statute. There used to be a dedicated office in Denmark for these crimes, didn't there? SAIs.
Yes, the Special International Crimes Office, SAIs. Set up in 2002 specifically to investigate and prosecute these serious international crimes committed abroad where the suspect had ties to Denmark.
To stop Denmark becoming a safe haven.
Exactly. But it was merged in 2013 with the state prosecutor for economic crime, forming SEC.
And what's happened since the merger?
Well, reports suggest the number of new investigations into these international crimes has actually decreased since then.
Why would that be? These investigations must be incredibly difficult anyway.
Hugely difficult. Just identifying potential crimes, often through asylum claims, is hard. And gathering evidence from abroad, it's complex, sometimes dangerous.
And witnesses need protection.
Definitely. Plus challenges within Denmark, language barriers, cultural differences, even accessing immigration files to identify people involved.
What about the victims in these cases? What rights do they have in the Danish system?
They have certain rights under Danish law, like information and potentially compensation. But state compensation is generally not available for victims without ties to Denmark if the crime happened abroad.
And the trials themselves must be complex logistically and legally.
Very. Danish courts often need to look at decisions from international courts to understand the relevant law and practice. Denmark is quite flexible on evidence rules, though, and international cooperation relies on mutual legal assistance based on reciprocity and human rights standards.
Okay, that gives us a good overview of a really tough area. Let's bring it back to day-to-day diplomacy in Denmark. Any examples of embassies being active?
Yeah, the Philippine Embassy in Copenhagen is a good example of the kind of activities missions undertake.
What sort of things?
Well, cultural diplomacy, they held a Pinoy adobo workshop, for instance, promoting Filipino food and culture.
Nice. Connecting with the local community and the Filipino diaspora.
Exactly. They also participate in things like the diplomatic bazaar, showcasing products, supporting charities, standard embassy work, but important.
And consular services, too.
Absolutely. They do outreach programs to Filipinos living in different parts of Denmark. Plus, they've held the chairmanship of the ASEAN Committee in Copenhagen, the ACC,
What does that involve?
organizing events, promoting business links between the ASEAN region and Denmark, strengthening those ties. It just shows the range of work an embassy does here.
It really does. So we've covered a lot today, haven't we? From the absolute necessity of trust in diplomacy.
To the nitty-gritty of protocol, the impact of digital tech, the complexities of international criminal law in Denmark.
And even seen a snapshot of embassy life with the Philippines example. It really paints a picture of international relations playing out right here.
Hopefully it's given you, our listeners who follow international affairs and Danish politics, some valuable insights.
Yeah, and maybe spark some more questions about how this all works in our connected world.
To keep exploring these topics, definitely follow Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Feiborg.
And if you found this deep dive useful today, please do consider leaving a 5-star rating.
It really helps analyses like this reach more people who are interested in these vital discussions.